Imagine staying awake for 48 hours straight. You've drained like 5 cups of coffee.
Oh man, a total nightmare.
Right. Your eyes are bloodshot, your heart is just racing, and you are desperately trying to cram an entire new language into your brain.
Usually for some massive presentation the next morning.
Exactly. And, spoiler alert, it completely destroys your brain. I mean, you don't walk into that presentation fluent. You walk in unable to remember your own name.
Let alone how to conjugate a verb. It's really the ultimate linguistic car crash.
It really is.
And yet, variations of that crash happen, every single day. People treat language acquisition like a data transfer.
Like plugging in a USB drive.
Yes. They assume they can just suffer through a weekend of intense study and suddenly wake up speaking flawlessly.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at exactly why that brute force approach fails so spectacularly.
And more importantly, what actually works.
Right. We've got a fascinating stack of strategy guides and notes to go through today, all focused on one incredibly ambitious mission. We want to strip the often overwhelming process of learning English down to its absolute core.
Down to the bare mechanics.
Yeah. We want to find the simple, actionable daily practices that beginners can use to genuinely guarantee progress.
And we're going to approach this a little differently today. Think of this less like a high-energy motivational seminar and more like a late-night conversation in a quiet library.
I love that vibe.
Yeah, we're getting serious. We're diving into the actual mechanics of human learning and looking for practical wisdom you can apply the second you wake up tomorrow.
Because the real secret to fluency isn't about working harder. The core concept we pulled from these materials actually mirrors a financial principle.
Compound interest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to really appreciate the cure, we have to deeply understand the disease. We need to look closely at that 48-hour cramming disaster, which the materials brilliantly personify through a case study of a learner named Jake.
Right, poor Jake. He represents a specific archetype from the text that they call the action-oriented realist.
Which, sounds like a compliment, but in this context, it's a trap.
It is a massive trap. The action-oriented realist is someone who expects a perfectly linear return on their investment.
So an hour of work equals an hour of results.
Exactly. They put in an hour of hard labor. They expect an hour's worth of visible, tangible results. They want the payoff yesterday. So when Jake had this big presentation, his instinct was to apply sheer, unadulterated force.
Just brute forcing it.
Yeah. He tried to hammer English into his short-term memory through sleep deprivation and caffeine.
Okay, let's unpack this because on some intuitive level, I think we've all felt the urge to do this. But cramming 48 hours of English into a weekend is like trying to eat a month's worth of food in one sitting.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. You don't get healthier, you just get sick. Why exactly do our brains violently reject binge learning?
What's fascinating here is the physical reality of cognitive overload. When you are learning something as complex as a new language, which involves, new sounds, new structural rules, new vocabulary, you aren't just memorizing facts.
You're building something.
You are physically building new neural pathways. And here is the critical part. That construction work does not happen while you are frantically staring at a textbook.
Wait, really? So the learning isn't happening during the actual studying?
Well, the intake is happening during the study, but the synthesis, the actual weaving of that information into your long-term memory happens when you step away.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, it happens when you sleep. Your brain needs downtime to consolidate those new linguistic patterns.
So skipping sleep is literally the worst thing you could do.
Exactly. When you binge learn and skip sleep, you are essentially overflowing a funnel. You're pouring gallons of water into a tiny opening. A fraction of an ounce makes it through, and 99% of it is just splashing over the sides, completely lost.
Which means his brain was just totally fried.
Totally fried. Jake's brain couldn't process the sheer volume of input without a rest cycle, so it initiated a biological emergency shutdown.
Which brings us to the first really important power word from the text for today. Plateau.
Yes.
For you listening, especially if you're a beginner, a plateau is a noun or a verb, meaning a period where you stay at the same level even though you are working hard. So Jake hit this massive plateau, a complete brick wall where his comprehension just flatlined.
Right, and that plateau is the brain's defense mechanism. It's saying, look, I cannot organize this information fast enough. Stop giving me more.
Just tapping out.
Yeah. If you try to force a language through cramming, a plateau isn't just a possibility. It is a biological guarantee you will stall out.
So if binge learning breaks the brain, and brute force guarantees a plateau, what is the alternative? How much can the brain absorb at once without triggering that shutdown?
This brings us to the counter strategy from the sources, which completely flips the script. It's built entirely around the 1% rule.
And to really visualize how this 1% rule functions, we need to abandon the idea of building a house brick by brick. Instead, you have to imagine rolling a snowball.
Which is a very specific type of momentum.
Precisely. Think about the physical act of starting a snowball. It is tiny. You're on your hands and knees. It moves incredibly slowly.
But there's a specific detail highlighted here that I think is just brilliant. At the very beginning of learning English, you aren't rolling that snowball on smooth, packed ice. You are pushing it through thick mud.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Pushing a snowball usually happens on ice, but the sources specifically say it feels like pushing it through mud. That friction feels uniquely accurate to a beginner trying to formulate a sentence.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that mud just our lack of base vocabulary?
It's the lack of vocabulary, yeah, but more importantly, it's the sheer cognitive load of manual translation.
Manual translation. What does that look like in the brain?
Well, think about what a beginner's brain is doing to speak a single sentence. You have a thought in your native language. Then you have to hunt down the English translation for every single word.
Right.
Then you have to actively recall the grammatical rules to put those words in the right order.
Which is exhausting on its own.
And then you have to consciously manipulate your mouth to produce sounds that might not even exist in your native tongue. Every single step requires intense, conscious effort. That is the mud.
And that phase, that heavy, muddy exhaustion, is exactly where most people quit.
Because they can't see the snowball growing.
Exactly. They quit because they are pushing with all their might. But the snowball is covered in dirt, it's barely growing, and they feel exactly like Jake. They feel like it's just not working.
Because they can't see the compounding effect yet.
Which brings us to our second power word, compound.
Right.
Compound, as a verb or adjective, means to add to something in a way that makes it grow faster and faster. Small habits compound over time into massive success.
And if you survive the mud, if you just keep pushing that tiny snowball a few inches every single day, you eventually hit a turning point.
The mud turns to ice.
Exactly. As you acquire that base structure and internalize the core grammar, the ground beneath you starts to freeze. You stop manually translating. You start recognizing patterns instinctively, and suddenly your snowball is huge, and it has its own mass.
It starts picking up more snow with way less effort.
Right. When you know 100 words, learning one new word is hard because you have no context for it. But when you know 2,000 words, learning a new word is easy because you instantly see how it connects to everything else you know.
That makes so much sense.
A single rotation of a massive snowball kicks up a massive amount of snow. The language begins to carry you forward rather than you dragging it. That momentum is what we call fluency.
It's the literal definition of compound interest. You aren't just adding progress. Your progress is multiplying.
Exactly. But the catch is that compound interest requires time, and it requires absolute consistency. A language doesn't compound if you study for 10 hours on a Sunday and then ignore it for 3 weeks.
Which brings us to the most critical part of this entire deep dive. Because, understand the snowball is great in theory. Grand theories are incredibly motivating while you're listening to this right now.
Sure.
But tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m., when the alarm goes off and you are tired, how do we actually get you to push the snowball? How do we move from theory to daily execution without getting exhausted?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we shift from neuroscience to behavioral psychology. Relying on motivation is a fool's errand.
Because motivation just vanishes, right?
Exactly. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions are notoriously unreliable. If you need to feel motivated to study English, you will fail. Instead, you need a system that assumes your motivation will frequently be absolute zero.
And the system outlined at our sources is called habit stacking.
The premise is brilliantly simple. Do not create a new, isolated block of time called English study time.
So no scheduling an hour at 7 p.m.
No, because if you tell yourself you'll study for 45 minutes at 7, you are setting yourself up for failure. Life is chaotic, you'll get stuck in traffic, you'll be exhausted from work, and that isolated block of time will just vanish.
Because it requires too much energy to initiate a completely new routine from a standstill.
Precisely. So instead of creating a new routine, you piggyback on an old one. You find a habit that is already hardwired into your daily life, something you do on autopilot every single day without fail.
And you attach your tiny 1% English practice directly to it.
Yes. The specific example given in the text is, when I brush my teeth, I will listen to one English idiom.
I love habit stacking. It's like hitching a free ride.
Yeah.
You attach your new, fragile English habit to the massive, unstoppable locomotive of your daily toothbrushing routine.
That's exactly what it is. And to make sure you actually get on the train, you have to aggressively manage what psychologists call activation energy.
Which brings us to our third power word, friction.
Friction.
As a noun, friction is anything that makes a task harder to start.
Right. Human beings are fundamentally wired to conserve energy. We will subconsciously take the path of least resistance. If studying English requires even a tiny bit of unnecessary effort to start, your brain will talk you out of it.
The sources provide a really specific context for this that sounds almost embarrassingly simple, but it profoundly highlights how lazy our brains actually are.
Oh, the book on the desk.
Yes, simply leaving your English book open on your desk physically reduces the friction to study versus keeping it in your backpack.
It sounds trivial, but it is the difference between success and failure. Think about the micro-decisions involved if your book is in your backpack. You have to decide to study. You have to walk across the room. You have to unzip the bag.
Find the book, find the pen.
Remember what page you were on. Every single one of those micro steps is a tiny point of friction. Cumulatively, they create a wall of resistance. Your brain looks at that process and says, let's just look at our phone instead.
But if the book is already open on the desk,
The friction is gone. You just sit down and look down. You bypass the brain's natural laziness, making the daily 1% improvement nearly effortless.
okay, so we have dismantled the cramming approach. We understand the biological reality of the plateau. We're visualizing the snowball, we're accepting the mud, and we're using habit stacking to completely remove the friction from our daily practice.
We know what to do.
Right, but the mechanics are only half the battle. Now that you have the daily technique, how do you maintain the mindset required to let the compounding happen over months and years?
This is crucial.
Because this is a long game. How do you avoid slipping back into Jake's action-oriented realist mindset when progress feels invisible?
By fundamentally changing your philosophy, the text introduces a profound approach attributed to the philosopher-teacher mindset.
The philosopher-teacher.
Yes. You have to fire the action-oriented realist inside your head, the part of you that demands immediate results for every hour studied, and you have to hire the philosopher-teacher who is obsessed with the 1% better everyday rule.
It implies a much slower, more deliberate heartbeat.
It's entirely about patience. There is a deeply resonant quote from the text used to capture this. You can't grow a forest in a weekend. You plant one seed every day.
Wow. You can't grow a forest in a weekend. That completely neutralizes the panic of a looming presentation. It destroys the urge to stay up for 48 hours.
Because you literally cannot force a tree to grow faster by yelling at it or pouring 10 times as much water on it. You'll just drown it.
So what does this all mean for the listener on day 40?
Day 40 is the real test.
Exactly. Say the book is perfectly open on the desk to reduce friction, the toothbrush is in their hand, but their motivation is absolutely comprehensively zero.
They're exhausted.
Right. They had a terrible day at work, and the mud feels thicker than ever. How does the 1% rule save them then?
By completely redefining what a successful day looks like.
How so?
Well, the action-oriented realist thinks a successful day is an hour of intense grammar drills. If they can't do an hour, they do 0.
Right.
But the philosopher teacher knows that on day 40, when motivation is dead, success might literally mean reading a single sentence out loud.
Just one sentence.
Or listening to a podcast for 90 seconds before turning it off. It's not about the volume of the study. It's about keeping the chain unbroken.
Because keeping the habit alive is what matters.
Exactly. As long as you do something, no matter how laughably small it feels, the compound interest remains intact. You didn't drop the snowball. You didn't let the seed die.
Which brings us to our final power word for today. Inevitable.
Yes.
Inevitable, an adjective, means something that is certain to happen. If you simply refuse to quit pushing the snowball, success and fluency become inevitable.
Mathematical certainty. Fluency becomes a byproduct of your system rather than a frantic destination you are trying to sprint toward.
It radically takes the pressure off. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be present.
Exactly. That's the secret to inevitability. Showing up, especially when it's just a token effort.
We have covered some truly transformative ground today. For you, the listener, we've walked through the trap of the 48-hour binge, avoiding that cramming trap entirely.
And we explored how cognitive overload triggers that plateau.
Right. We replace the stress of cramming with rolling the snowball through the mud, trusting that the brutal early friction will eventually freeze over into fluency.
We looked at bypassing your own laziness through habit stacking, hitching a ride on daily habits like brushing your teeth.
And reducing friction by leaving the book open. Most importantly, we embrace the philosopher teacher who knows that planting one seed a day makes a forest inevitable.
It really all comes down to maintaining that unbroken chain.
So we want to hand the exact challenge from the source material directly to you. What is your 1% habit for this week? Is it one podcast? One new word? Let us know. Find your anchor habit, attach your English practice to it, and start the snowball.
And to anchor all of this, I want to deliver a closing philosophical thought from the sources. Success isn't about being the best, it's about being better than you were yesterday.
Beautifully said. But before we officially sign off, I want to leave you with one final original concept to mull over on your own.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We spent this whole deep dive talking about how reducing friction helps you build the snowball of English fluency. But think about the reverse. What if you actively added friction to your bad habits?
Oh, wow.
Right. If you want to stop endlessly scrolling social media in your native language so you have more time to learn English, what is the equivalent of closing the book to make that bad habit just a little bit harder to start tomorrow?
Think about it.